Hi, everyone. Happy weekend.
Hmm. Okay, let's break down what breakthrough contact is revealing to you. There's someone who existed in your daily reality until silence became the boundary. And that silence is showing signs of breaking in ways you might not be anticipating. The person you deliberately stopped engaging with, the connection you consciously severed, the relationship you ended through withdrawal of your presence and your words. That individual who used to occupy space in your communication, in your thoughts, in your energy, until you made the difficult choice to remove them completely. No contact wasn't casual decision. It was protective measure. It was boundary enforcement. It was you choosing yourself over dynamic that wasn't serving you. And now something is shifting in that sealed off space. The distance you created through silence might be experiencing pressure from their side. The boundary you established through absence might be approaching a test. The no contact you've been maintaining, successfully or with difficulty, could be facing challenge in form of incoming communication you haven't invited but might receive anyway. In the particular energy of February, where feelings intensify and expression feels culturally supported, people who've been respecting silence sometimes break it. The season creates permission, um, creates courage, creates framework for reaching out that might not exist in March or October. Valentine proximity makes people reflective about connections they've lost or damaged or walked away from, makes them wonder if repair is possible, makes them brave enough to try contact they've been resisting. Let me illuminate what patterns might be building toward breach of the silence you established. In the psychology of people who've been cut off through no contact, several phases typically unfold: initial shock and confusion, then anger or hurt, then bargaining internally about what they did wrong, then acceptance that seems final. But acceptance sometimes gives way to renewed desire for connection, especially when triggered by seasonal energy or life changes or realizations that develop over time. Your specific situation might involve someone who cycled through exactly these phases, who initially respected your boundary or had no choice but to respect it, is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than. But who's been processing internally what the disconnection means? Who's been sitting with the loss? Who's been examining their role in what created the need for no contact? Who's been developing different perspective or different capacity or different understanding? Notice if you've been thinking about this person more frequently recently, random memories surfacing, dreams featuring them, appearing with unusual frequency, sudden impulses to check their social media, unexpected curiosity about how they're doing. These aren't always just your own processing. Sometimes they're energetic ripples preceding their action towards you. Your system picking up signals that they're about to move. Some people break no contact because they've done genuine internal work. They've been to therapy. They've addressed behaviors that created problems. They've developed insight into patterns that drove you away. They reach out not to resume old dynamic, but to demonstrate they've become capable of different dynamic, to show growth, to ask if new version of them could be received differently than old version. You might receive exactly this type of contact, someone acknowledging specifically what they did that necessitated your withdrawal, taking clear responsibility without deflection or minimizing, demonstrating through their words that they understand not just that you left, but why you had to leave, showing evidence of changed consciousness. This doesn't obligate you to respond or reconnect, but it indicates they're not approaching from same place they were before. Others break no contact because they're in crisis or need. Something happened in their life that makes them reach out to people from their past. Loss, illness, major life transition, financial struggle, emotional breakdown. They contact you not necessarily because they've changed, but because they need something they think you might provide: support, validation, help, comfort. The reaching out serves their need more than any mutual reconnection desire. This reflection invites you to consider, if the person you cut off contacted you, would you want it to be because they changed or because they need something? Let me clarify what powerful message specifically indicates about potential content. Powerful suggests the communication carries weight beyond casual reconnection attempt, not, hey, how are you, surface message. Something more substantial, more vulnerable, more honest. Content that required them building significant courage to compose and send, words that reveal depth of what they've been processing during the silence, admission that cost them something to make. In the distinction between superficial and substantial contact attempts, powerful messages typically contain several elements: specific acknowledgement of what happened, clear taking of responsibility for their part, authentic expression of how the disconnection has affected them, statement of what they've learned or how they've changed, request that respects your autonomy while expressing their desire for some form of response or reconnection. Your situation might involve someone crafting exactly this kind of carefully considered communication, not impulsive drunk text. Not casual, been thinking about you that requires you to do emotional labor, but actual thoughtful message that demonstrates they've been sitting with this, that they understand gravity of breaking the no contact you established, that they're not doing it lightly or selfishly. Some powerful messages are love, confessions that were never made, person finally speaking feelings they kept hidden, finally admitting what they felt but didn't express while you were in contact, finally being honest about emotional reality that their behavior contradicted. I loved you and I didn't know how to show it type revelations. These can feel validating or frustrating depending on whether you wanted that honesty earlier. Others are apologies that acknowledge specific harms, not generic, sorry if I hurt you deflections. But I'm sorry I did this specific thing, and here's how I understand now that it affected you type accountability. These demonstrate genuine reflection, show they've been thinking not just about their own feelings, but about impact on you, indicate growth beyond self-focus. Still others are requests for closure or clarity, person asking questions they didn't ask before, trying to understand what happened from your perspective, seeking information that helps them make sense of why the relationship ended the way it did. These can be legitimate desire for understanding or veiled attempts to restart conversation without respecting that you might not owe them explanations. This reflection invites you to consider, what would a powerful message need to contain for you to consider it worth reading fully? Let me address what February specifically activates in no contact situations. February carries concentrated cultural emphasis on love and connection and relationship reflection, media saturated with romance, advertisements about couples, Valentine's Day creating pressure and permission simultaneously. People in this environment naturally think about relationships they're in, relationships they want, and relationships they lost. The ones they walked away from or the ones that walked away from them. In this particular seasonal crucible, no contact becomes harder to maintain for the person who didn't want the silence. Every commercial about love reminds them of what they lost. Every Valentine display makes them wonder if they could have that with you if they tried again. Every couple they see makes them miss what you had or what you could have had. The environment amplifies regret and desire for reconnection. It's probable whoever you cut off is experiencing exactly this February intensification of feelings about the disconnection, the cultural moment giving them framework for reaching out. The seasonal permission making contact attempt feel appropriate rather than boundary violation in their mind. They might convince themselves that Valentine's season is exactly when people reconnect, when second chances happen, when love stories restart. Watch for communication arriving in specific February windows, days leading up to Valentine's Day itself, the evening of Valentine's Day if they're alone, the day after Valentine's if the holiday highlighted their aloneness, weekend following Valentine's when initial emotion has settled but desire for connection remains. These temporal hotspots often trigger contact from people who've been silent. Some people use February as excuse they've been seeking. They've wanted to reach out for weeks or months but couldn't justify breaking your boundary. Valentine's season gives them justification. It's Valentine's, so I thought I'd reach out becomes their rationalization for doing what they wanted to do anyway. The timing is convenience more than genuine seasonal inspiration. This reflection invites you to consider, does seasonal timing make potential contact more or less meaningful to you? Let me speak to what you need to understand about your position when contact arrives. You hold complete power in this dynamic. They're reaching out. You decide if you respond. You decide if you engage. You decide what terms you'll accept, if you accept any. You decide if their message warrants reply or immediate deletion. Their courage to contact doesn't create your obligation to receive. Their vulnerability doesn't mandate your reciprocation. Their desire for connection doesn't override your need for protection. In the reclamation of agency after being contacted by someone you cut off, many people forget they're in control. They feel pressure to respond quickly, to be kind, to give the person chance they're asking for, to consider their feelings, to not be cruel. All of that might be admirable in other contexts, but in this context, your primary responsibility is to yourself, to honoring why you went no contact, to protecting the peace you've built without them. It's critical you check in with yourself before responding if you choose to respond at all. Why did you go no contact originally? Have those reasons resolved? Is this person actually different or just temporarily uncomfortable with consequences of their behavior? Do you want them back in your life in any capacity, or are you only considering it because they asked? Would reconnecting serve you or just serve their need to feel better about themselves? Some people receiving contact from no contact situations immediately soften. The message triggers old attachment, old hope, old patterns of caretaking or people pleasing. They forget why the boundary was necessary. They focus on person's current distress or growth claims and minimize the history that necessitated disconnection. They give chance they shouldn't give because saying no feels mean. You might be vulnerable to exactly this kind of premature softening. If you are, slow down. Don't respond immediately. Sit with the message. Remember why you needed distance. Remember what it cost you to establish that boundary. Remember how much peace or growth or healing happened in the silence. Don't throw that away quickly because they wrote nice words. Others receiving contact feel instant resentment or anger. How dare they break the boundary? How dare they think they can just reach out? How dare they make this about their needs? These defensive reactions are also valid, but they shouldn't necessarily dictate your response. You can acknowledge anger and still choose measured response rather than reactive one. You can honor your feelings without being controlled by them. This reflection invites you to consider, what would your wisest self want you to do if this contact arrives? Let me reveal what different response options might create. Some people choose to respond with openness. They read the message, they consider its contents, they decide person has demonstrated enough growth or contrition to warrant engagement. They reply thoughtfully. They create conditions for conversation that might lead to reconnection in some form. Not necessarily romantic reconciliation, but perhaps friendship, perhaps civil relationship, perhaps just closure conversation that serves both parties. In the possibility of constructive reconnection, some no contact situations do resolve into healthier relationships eventually. Time apart allows both people to grow. Silence creates space for reflection that proximity prevented. Disconnection reveals what mattered, that was taken for granted. Not every no contact needs to be permanent. Some are temporary boundaries that accomplish their protective purpose and can be relaxed once growth occurs. You might discover this is exactly that kind of situation where the person contacting you has genuinely changed, where their message demonstrates real understanding, where reconnecting doesn't mean returning to old toxicity, but creating new, healthier dynamic, where your boundary did its job by forcing them to transform. If that's the case, careful, measured reconnection might serve both of you. Others choose to respond with finality. They read the message, they recognize it doesn't demonstrate sufficient change or understanding. They reply once to make clear the boundary remains. I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not interested in reconnecting. Please respect my decision. Clean, clear, final. Then they block, if necessary, to prevent further attempts. They honor the person's courage while still protecting their peace. Still others choose not to respond at all. They read the message or they don't read it, but they don't reply. They maintain the silence they established. They trust that no response is response. That continued no contact communicates their position clearly, that they don't owe explanation or acknowledgement. This is completely valid. You're never obligated to engage with someone just because they initiated contact. This reflection invites you to consider which response style aligns with your actual values and needs versus which response style comes from guilt or pressure. Let me close by speaking to what this potential contact offers, regardless of how you respond. Whether contact arrives or doesn't, whether you respond or maintain silence, you're learning something valuable about boundaries and self-respect. You went no contact for reasons. You maintained it despite difficulty. You chose yourself over connection that wasn't serving you. That's growth. That's strength. That's you honoring your needs. Their potential message doesn't negate your strength. It tests it. May you honor your original boundary. May you trust your self-protection instinct. May you choose from wisdom, not guilt. Contact might be approaching. The silence might be tested. Your choice remains sovereign. A powerful message is coming your way. Substantial communication might be forming from someone you disconnected from, the one you stopped speaking to, the person you went no contact with. No contact, the silence you established as boundary. February, seasonal energy is creating conditions that often trigger reconnection attempts. The person you cut off might be building courage to breach the boundary you established. And your work is clarity before response, remembering why you went no contact, assessing if those reasons have genuinely resolved, protecting the peace you built in the silence, not responding from guilt or old patterns, not letting their discomfort override your needs, not mistaking temporary change for permanent transformation, trusting that maintaining your boundary is option, that responding is option, that how you engage or don't engage is entirely your choice. Trust this. Trust that you had good reasons for no contact. Trust that their message doesn't erase those reasons. Trust that you're allowed to maintain silence even if they reach out beautifully. Trust that you're also allowed to respond if their growth seems genuine and reconnection serves you. Trust that there's no wrong choice as long as choice comes from your wisdom rather than their pressure. Stay boundaried, stay clear, stay sovereign. Message might arrive. Response is optional. Your peace is primary.